We don't deal much with controversial issues here on Petra Publications. That was until I uploaded a video reviewing Fault Lines by Vodi Bakum, which deals with social justice and critical race theory. And so I figured, well, we already done that. Let's go ahead and review something that deals with the sexual realm of controversy. This is A Strange New World by Carl Trueman, how thinkers and activists redefined identity and sparked the sexual revolution. This is a fairly short book, only 186 pages. It's 204 with a glossary, notes, and an index in the back. It's just a paperback glued volume put out by Crossway. If you're new, let me welcome you to Petra Publications. My name is Davis, and here on this channel, I just review Reformed Christian books. Sometimes I might review a book that's not Reformed, but Christian books nonetheless. And sometimes I put out music and stuff like that. If that sounds interesting to you, I'd love to have you subscribe and join us. Welcome. And if you've been watching for a while, links to my PayPal and Patreon are down in the description below. Thank you so much for watching. Carl Trueman, just some information about the author before we dive into the book itself. He was born in 1967 in Dudley, England, and he studied at Marling School, Stroud in Gloucestershire, St. Catherine's College at the University of Cambridge, and the University of Aberdeen. He's a member of the OPC, the Orthodox Presbyterian Church, and he was a professor at Westminster Theological Seminary, PA, before moving to Grove City College, PA, where he is now professor of Civilization and the Biblical Revelation and Christianity and Civilization, Modern and Postmodern Challenges. Trueman is a professor, theologian, church historian, author. No, I didn't. I thought I repeated myself. Sorry. He's a professor, theologian, church historian, author, husband, father, and though perhaps not everyone would call him this, I would call him a philosopher. So that's just some information about Trueman himself. So for an overview of this book, I'm going to start by reading the back cover. There's this little blurb here that I'm going to read that just gives kind of a brief overview of what this book is about. In A Strange New World, Carl Trueman examines the historical, philosophical, and technological factors driving identity politics today. This concise version of his popular book, The Rise and Triumph of the Modern Self, offers an accessible analysis of influences, including technology and pornography, as well as cultural ideologies from the Romantics to the New Left. Offering a much-needed biblical perspective of personhood, Trueman confronts the current era of expressive individualism, showing readers how to engage in a culture that's often hostile to Christian beliefs. And so that's basically the book, and he briefly gives his thesis on page 26, and he says, "Expressive individualism is the default setting for understanding ourselves in the 21st century." So that's his thesis, that's where he's coming from in this book. But let me give just a few more things that I really liked about this book as I was reading it. This is one that my pastor recommended to me. I probably wouldn't have read it otherwise. I saw it on Reformation Heritage Books and was intrigued by it, but I didn't bite the bullet and just buy the book. I was concerned that there might be something I disagree with, but I didn't. I found that it was actually, I agreed with it so much that it was painful. It chastised me a little bit. And so it deals with so many contemporary issues, like in a way that not many other books have. So I talked about Fault Lines, which is the social justice movement and evangelicalism's looming catastrophe. And that dealt with some things that no other book has talked about. I guess it has, but not in a way that a Reformed believer would agree with. And this is the same way. It's much in the same vein as that book. It deals with the same issues, but in a different context. And so it just talks about talks about topics that are not commonly discussed, that should be discussed, that we should know about, that we should be familiar with. And so that's very important, and that was one thing that I really appreciated about this book. And another thing that I appreciated is, much like Vodi Bakum, Trueman never shies away from telling the truth and telling things the way that they are. He's not afraid of the truth. And sometimes I read books, Christian books, even Reformed books, that they're like just barely saying things the way they are. Trueman doesn't really care. He's going to say it the way it is. He doesn't care if you're offended. And I really, really appreciate that. And then another thing that's great about this book is the inclusion of study questions at the end of each chapter. They're extremely useful. They help you think through things. They help you understand what the chapter was about. And I also really appreciate that at the end of every chapter there's a conclusion. If something goes over your head, it did mine a couple times, goes over your head, no problem. There's a conclusion. He wraps it all up nicely for you in that little section there. So that was very nice, and I really like the study questions. So to get more of an idea of what is in this book, I will read the table of contents here. First, you have a foreword, which is by Ryan T. Anderson, and then you have a preface, and then you dive into the book proper, which is the welcome to this strange new world, romantic roots, Prometheus Unbound, sexualizing psychology, politicizing sex, the revolt of the masses, plastic people, liquid world, the sexual revolution of the LGBTQ+, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, and finally, strangers in this strange new world. And then, of course, you have the glossary, the notes, and the index, which I mentioned earlier. Really like the inclusion of a glossary. You don't see that very much, but there are some trendy words in this book that perhaps you wouldn't know. I didn't know some of them. Just a helpful thing that gives the definition to those terms. And yeah, so that's basically what you'll find here. Usually at this point in the review, I ask the question, would I buy this book? And I think it's safe to say, yes, I would. Just a heads up, it does deal in some very controversial waters. It may offend you. It offended me. As I said before, it cut me to the heart, answering some things that I had often wondered myself, and that was very, very useful. So to let you know more of what this book is like, I have a few quotes here that I'm going to read. And the first is from page 23. It says, "In short, the modern self is one where authenticity is achieved by acting outwardly in accordance with one's inward feelings." And try to get this through quickly. I tend to drag at this part of the review on many of my book reviews, but try to get through this quickly. Page 71, he says, this is at the very beginning of chapter 4, "One of the most obvious aspects of modern public life is the central role that sex plays within it. This should strike us as rather odd. The fact that the most private and intimate act between two people has become so important to public life is surely a strange development." True indeed. Later on that page, he says, "In biblical times or in ancient Greece, sex was regarded as something that human beings did. And today it's considered to be something vital to who humans are. Hence, we now have the whole notion of sexual identity and the ever-expanding letters that make up the LGBTQ plus alliance." Fascinating stuff there. I ended up sharing that stuff with my friends. I was saying, look, this Trueman says, this used to be something that we did, and now it's something we are. And everyone's like, wow, that's something I never thought about before. And it's a true statement. Page 74. "As the abolition of the pre-political makes us all Marxists now, so the assumption that sex is happiness makes us all Freudians." Another thing that cut me very, very deep. We're Marxist and we're Freudian because we believe all these lies that we've been told. Page 85. He says that such questions are those... My dog just barked. "Those preoccupied with the length of skirts seem rather quaint today. It's testimony to the nature and power of the sexual revolution. The sexual revolution did not redefine modesty. It overthrew it completely. Even to raise such questions as to the modesty of bikinis or skirt length today will likely elicit at best laughter, and at worst, some rebuke for daring to tell someone else how to dress. In short, the very concept of modesty is now considered to be repressive, an oppressive assault upon individual authenticity." Another painful one, but very true. Page 96. He says, If expressive individualism has come to focus on personal satisfaction as to the meaning of life, technology has served that cause well. Later that page, if, as I argued in previous chapters, the modern person considers himself to be something he can create for himself, so he tends to extend that same notion to his relationship to the world in general. We no longer think of ourselves as subject to the world's fixed nature, or of it as having an objective authority or meaning. We are the ones with power, and we are the ones who give the world significance. Again, very, very hard stuff here. At page 120 and 121, he says, "But not only are the narratives of notions being contested, they're facing challenges from other narratives and other ways of being imagined communities. A moment's reflection indicates this. The language of community is now routinely applied to categories that have little or nothing to do with nation or religion or family. There's the black community, the LGBTQ plus community, the Asian community, the disabled community, even the BDSM, bondage, discipline, dominance, and submission, sadomasochism community. The use of the word community for those various groups indicates both the collapse of traditional nations of belonging and the rise of a vast and growing number of alternative ways of human beings imagining their relationships to the world or to those around them." And then later at the end of that paragraph, people can now pick and choose their communities, and that means that they can pick and choose their identities. That one is important. And the whole entire time that Trueman writes in this book, he never offers a solution to the problem. In the preface of the book, he basically says, I'm just here to point out that there is a problem. I'm not offering a solution. And so the entire time you read the book, you have no solution. Of course, as Christians, we know what the solution is. But he doesn't offer it in the book. But at the very end, he gives a very conclusive thought to the end of this topic. And so to close out this review on page 186 and 187, I'll just read these couple things here. He says, "Suffering here and now may at times be terrible, even unbearable, but it is never meaningless. No, it finds its meaning in the life, death, resurrection, ascension, and return of the Lord Jesus Christ." And so this book comes to an end. The world in which we live seems set to be entertaining a new, chaotic, uncharted, and dark era. But we should not despair. We need to prepare ourselves, be informed, know what we believe and why we believe it, worship God in a manner that forms us as true disciples and pilgrims, intellectually and intuitively, and keep before our eyes the unbreakable promises that the Lord has made and confirmed in Jesus Christ. This is not a time for a hopeless despair nor naive optimism. Yes, let us lament the ravages of the fall as they play out in the distinctive ways that our generation has chosen. But let the lamentation be the context for sharpening our identity as the people of God and our hunger for the great consummation that awaits at the marriage feast of the Lamb. To that I say amen. And I hope this review was helpful to you, and if it was, I'd love to hear from you in the comment section down below. Lord willing, I will see you again very soon. God bless.